north of Greece, and it included Philippi and Berea, and it also included Thessalonica. And so the churches there had participated in some giving. And what does Paul say about their attitude of giving in verse 3? What's he say there? Say that one more time. Yeah, and read the second part of the verse. He says, according to their ability, and even beyond. And even beyond, he says. In verse 4 of their attitude, he says that these churches were begging him. They were begging him for, my version says, for the favor of participation in supporting the saints. That's their attitude about giving. They want to give so much that they gave beyond their ability, and they were begging him to participate in this ministry. I also want to point out to you verse 5. What does verse 5 say about those Christians in Macedonia and their giving? One more time? Yes. And so I want to read that. Read yours. Read, if Sister Laura, since you said it, read verse 5 for us. Okay. No, we're right. We're right together. They gave themselves to the Lord first. Up on the screen here, I want you to understand. He went on to say, and to us, they devoted themselves. And that's important. As we talk about their attitude in giving, they devoted themselves. They made some sort of commitment to God and to the apostles as it relates to giving. That's important. It's more than just a transaction. They made a commitment to God first as they were preparing to give. That's an important detail. In verse 4, backing up one more time, when we think about the desire, again, I've already pointed out in verse 4 that they begged him to participate in this, and we see elements or examples of them in verse 4 as well as in verses 10 and 11 that they had a desire to do it. It wasn't just a transaction. It wasn't a check the box thing. It wasn't like, well, this is one of 5 acts of worship, so let me do this so I can be in compliance. That wasn't their attitude. There was a desire there. We look at verse 4. Let's drop down to 10 and 11. Paul says, and I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage, who were the first to begin a year ago, not only to do this, but also to desire to do it. Verse 11, but now finish doing it also, that just as there was the readiness to desire it, so there may also be the completion of it by your ability. They desired it, they regarded it as a privilege to give, not as a burden to give. In verse 12 and then beyond, and we'll see the rest of this as Sister Laura is going to read the second half. In verse 12, starting in verse 12, and then in the second half of chapter 8 that Sister Laura is going to read here in a second, we see this concept of their readiness. Look at verse 12. My version translates it this way. My version says, for if the readiness, keyword, is present, it is acceptable according to what a man has, not according to what he does not have. I want you to understand that the word readiness there translates from a word. It doesn't mean that they were just prepared. It means that they were eager and that they had a willing mindset to do it. It wasn't ready just that they were in the moment prepared, but they were eager. And we see that theme come out as well. And again, it's not a tax. He's not looking for what you don't have. He's not asking you to take out a loan so that you can give. It's based on what you have. You got $10? You got 10 cents based on what you have. Sister Laura, please, would you continue from verse 13 to the end of the chapter? Mm-hmm.
What is more, he was chosen by the churches to accompany us as we carry the offering, as we administer in full to honor the Lord himself, and to show our eagerness to help. We want to avoid any criticism of the way we administer this liberal gift. For we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of men. In addition, we are sending with them our brother, who has often proved to us in many ways, who is zealous, and now even more so because of his great confidence in me. As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker among you. As for our brothers, they are representatives of the churches and an honor to Christ. Therefore, show these men the proof of your love and the reason for our pride in you, so that the churches can see it.
Excellent. And again, Paul is urging them on. I want to just draw our attention to one piece of this, and then we're going to go into chapter 9. One more time, that God does not intend giving to be a burden. Did you notice what Paul said to them in verse 13? And don't forget, this is a collection that churches in Macedonia had participated in times past. Paul also lets us know in 1 Corinthians 16 that churches in the Galatian region also had taken up collections for poorer Christians in Jerusalem, right? And so Paul is urging them on. Notice what he says in verse 13 in terms of this not intended to be a burden. In 13 he says, for this whole collection thing is not for the ease of others and for your affliction. In other words, we're not asking you to take a hardship. We're not asking you to just help other people out and you suffer. He says the goal here is to sort of help develop a sense of equality in this sense. In verse 14, he says, right now, at the present time, your abundance right now can become a supply for their need. But then he says, but don't forget, and I'm paraphrasing, that there may come a day when you might have a need. And their abundance might help you, is what he says in verse 14. We're not taxing you. We're trying to support saints in the kingdom. And right now, these saints have a need. And there might just come a day when you might have a need. And we might depend on that same generosity. And then he uses an Old Testament example of the nation of Israel when God had given them manna. Remember, he gave them manna for the first time, and God was very, very specific. He told them to go out on certain days and collect a certain amount. I think it was like an omer full. But human nature being what it is, some people were collecting more than what they were supposed to get. But that's just how we are. We don't listen, right? God said, get this much, do it on this day. Some people are out trying to get more. But some people didn't get the full omer. And so he's using in verses 15 and 16, he's reminding them, well, just in that situation where there were some who gathered a lot, some who gathered a little, but at the end they all had the same. That's the motivation here. That's what Paul is referencing. All right? We're doing good. I just wanted to check the attitude. He has a lot more to say in chapter 9. I know Khari was one. Who was my other reader? You were my other reader, right? Okay. Khari, I want you to kick us off, please. So let me see. We have... So, Khari, chapter 9, verses 1 through 7, please. Nice and loud. Superfluous. That's it.
For me to write to you, for I know the forwardness of your mind, for which I boast of you to them of Macedonia, that Achaia was ready a year ago, and your zeal hath provoked very many. Yet have I sent the brethren lest our boasting of you should be in vain in this behalf, that as I said, ye may be ready, lest haply, if they of Macedonia come with me, and find you unprepared. We say not, ye should be ashamed in this same confident boasting. Therefore, I thought it was necessary to exhort the brethren that they would go before unto you, and make up beforehand your bounty, whereof ye had notice before, that the same might be ready, as a matter of bounty and of not.
Very good. Where'd you stop at 5?
7.
Yeah. Do 6 to 7. Yeah.
He which soweth sparingly shall reap also sparingly, and he which soweth bountifully shall reap also bountifully.
Bountifully, yep.
Every man according as his purpose in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly, of his necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver.
Excellent. You did a great job. All right. There was a lot of information just in this passage that Kylie just read for us as we understand more principles about giving. Let me just call your attention. And again, one more time, I'm gonna generally summarize what Kylie read in these first 7 verses. Paul continues to urge the Corinthians to get themselves ready for this collection, because he's I'm paraphrasing, he's telling them, look guys, I've been bragging about you and your giving to the Macedonians for a long time, about how generous you are. So it would be embarrassing if I show up and you're not ready to give. So what he's saying is, I really need you to get ready, because when we come, it will really be embarrassing, because I've been bragging the whole time about how generous the Corinthians are. I've been telling the Macedonians, man, these guys are great. So he says, come on, need you to get this ready. Now notice what he says here. There's a couple things, couple principles here. In verse 5, one more time for emphasis, Paul says, in verse 5, so I thought it necessary to urge the brethren that they would go on ahead to you and arrange beforehand your previously promised bountiful gift, that gift might be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by what? Covetousness. And what did we say covetousness is? Covetousness is having such an unhealthy desire for something that you'll pretty much do anything to get it. That was what Ananias and Sapphira's problem was. Right? They coveted the proceeds from the land they sold. They coveted that so much that they made a decision to keep back a part of it. And I told you that the Greek word for that, I think it's nosphizo, but that word for kept back part of the price, it is embezzle. It translates to embezzle. When they did that, even though it was land that they owned and land that they sold, they evidently made a promise or a pledge to God, and when they went back and reneged on that promise, God saw that as embezzling money from him. So Paul says, guys, look, in verse 5, I want you to stay committed to what you promised beforehand, because I don't want your gift to be affected by covetousness. In verse 6, he gives us a principle of giving, but he uses an agricultural example. And I think it's intuitive. I think it makes sense. He says in verse 6, he who sows sparingly, he who plants a few seeds will harvest or reap how? If you plant just a few seeds, or if you sow sparingly, what will your harvest be like? It will also be sparing. Makes sense. But he who sows bountifully, if you give a lot, if you plant a lot of seeds, then your harvest, or you will reap how? Bountifully. That is the law of giving. Then in verse 7, and verse 7 actually answers one of the questions that was asked at the start of this series. He says, let each one do just as he has, key word here, purposed in his heart. Let's just start there because he says something out there. Let each one do just as he has purposed in his heart. Paul doesn't say everyone has to give $100. Everyone has to give $50. He says, no, each one must do just as he has purposed in his heart. This is a principle for giving. What does purpose mean? Someone asked this. It means to choose or decide beforehand. God wants our giving to be based on what we purpose in our heart. He doesn't say we have to give 10%, doesn't say we have to give 20%. I think he will make us winners as we give, for sure. But what he's really interested in is us not being like Ananias and Sapphira. He wants us to make the commitment and stick to it. If you pledge beforehand, our giving, by the way, when we pass the collection baskets, our decision about giving should have been made long before the baskets come around. Long before. Long before. He doesn't want us to pick out the lint and the buttons in our pocket and whatever happens to be there, put that. That's not the giving he wants from us. He wants us to make a decision beforehand. Lord, I'm going to give 5% of my income. Lord, I'm going to give 10% of my income. Lord, I'm going to give $200 a week. Lord, I'm going to give $1,000 a month. Whatever it is. And he wants us to stick to it. And if that means for you to be able to stick to it, you can't have Starbucks that week, well, oh well. Oh well. But that's what he wants us to do. Each one must do purpose in our heart, he says. And then he says in verse 7 something else interesting. He says something else about the attitude that we apply to our giving. And what does he say in the second part of verse 7? Not how? All right, so I heard not under compulsion, and then something else he says. Yes, not grudgingly, not with a bad attitude, not as if the giving is causing you grief. Oh man, I got to give this $50 again. Man, every week, $50. Man, I mean, when is this going to stop? He doesn't want that attitude. Not grudgingly, not with a bad attitude, not as if it is paining you every time you do it. And also not under compulsion, not because you feel forced to do it. He don't want you to give that way either. Not grudgingly or under compulsion. It says, for God loves what kind of giver? A cheerful giver. Greek word there is a word, tell me if this sounds familiar to you. The Greek word there is hilaros. Sound like an English word? Hilaros. Does it sound like a word that you know? Hilarious. But in English, hilarious for us means something that's funny. Well, God isn't saying that it's funny. The word means cheerful or happy or joyful when we give. He doesn't want us to do it under compulsion, that we feel forced. Doesn't want us to do it grudgingly, as if we got 5 minutes. I'm gonna take 7. Grudgingly, as if we're pained to do it. But he says he wants us to be joyful, that we're supporting the ministry of his work. Is that clear? Give in a happy or joyous state of mind. Verse 8 is another important principle. I'm going to read this for myself for the sake of time. He says, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, that always having sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance for every good deed. That is an interesting thing that God is saying. I'm going to read this one more time. Verse 8, God is able to make all grace abound to you, that always having all sufficiency in everything. In other words, God is able, first of all, to make sure that we have everything we need. We have all sufficiency in everything, that you may have an abundance for every good deed. This is essentially saying that God can make this thing work in a way where we have everything we need and enough to give. This is what God is saying, or this is what Paul is saying about what God's ability is. God has the ability to make sure or to work this thing out where we have enough that we need: food, shelter, clothing. And on top of that, enough to give, even if it's 1 cent like what the widow gave. All right? These are the principles of giving. I'm going to pause one more time, and then we're going to close out with the questions. Make sure that we answer all the questions that were asked 6 weeks ago at the start of the lesson. Any questions, comments, or feedback? Our attitude is so important. Our faith is so important in this process of giving. It is more than just a transaction. All right. These were questions. The ones that are crossed out, we already answered. The ones with the check mark and crossed out, we already answered. Am I supposed to give on every first day of the week, even if I get paid monthly? We answered that. I think you should know the answer to that by now. Third question, does the 10% tithing system from the Old Covenant apply to us today? You should know the answer for that now. Number 5, how does the concept of stewardship apply to our financial giving? God owns everything. He's made us stewards of what really belongs to him. And when we give, we're really giving back to God what already belongs to him. Let's look at, first of all, the 2 questions that are highlighted in yellow, starting with number 2. We just covered it 30 seconds ago. What does it mean to be a cheerful giver, as Paul describes in 2 Corinthians 9? What does that mean? What does it mean? What does it mean about our attitude when we give? One more time. Be grateful, have a joyous attitude about giving. Not that we're forced to do it, not that it's a burden. Number 8, what does it mean to be a purposeful giver or to purpose in your heart? We just covered this 90 seconds ago. To purpose in your heart means what? Thank you. To predetermine, to decide beforehand. We make the decision beforehand. We make the commitment to God beforehand. Question number 4. The buzzer's going to get us, but I'm going to steal 2 minutes because I want to make sure we close out with these questions. Number 4, is there a certain amount of our giving that needs to go to the church compared to our other charitable giving outside of church? Like, for example, if you give to the United Way, I guess, or Save the Seals or something like that. The question is there a certain amount of our giving that needs to go to the church compared to our other charitable giving outside of the church? So here's my answer here. First of all, not playing a game of semantics, but it's important that we think of this in this way. We don't give to the church. We give to God. That's number 1. We give back to God. We don't give to the church. We don't. So when we think of it that way, it's like we're comparing one nonprofit to another nonprofit. Our giving is back to God. But again, the question is there a certain amount of our giving that needs to go back to God? Well, we've discussed that. We make a commitment. We purpose in our hearts. The question becomes, God's ministry is about reaching the lost, and it's also about supporting the spiritual growth and sometimes the physical needs of those who are already saved. 2 minutes. That's what we're giving back to. But each one must purpose in their hearts. That's a decision, a question that we each have to answer individually. Number 6, do I still have to give to the church, although we don't give to the church, we give to God. Do I still have to give to the church if I do not fully agree with how money is spent on certain ministries? Hear me very carefully on this, please. It's an interesting question. As Christians and as members of the body here, as being part of the flock, part of our subjection to the elders who have been installed to oversee and shepherd our care, part of our subjection to them is also to their authority. Part of that subjection includes us trusting in their God-driven decisions that they make for how the budget will be applied from year to year. That's part of our subjection. But I'm going to go one better for you. It just so happens that our shepherds, and this isn't new, they've done this Deep River for years, have a process here Whereas the budget is being developed, they make room and opportunity for input from members. They even have, and I'm making this term up, what I'll call office hours, where there's a time set and you can come, and if there's certain ministries and stuff you want to talk about, you have an opportunity to input that in that process as well. But at the end of the day, part of our subjection to their authority is trusting that their God-driven decisions, or that they're making God-driven decisions about how to allocate or appropriate funds that are collected in the budget. Okay? Number 7, some churches say that it's not scriptural for a congregation to support ministries operated by nonprofit organizations. Is this true? Another interesting question. I don't have a scripture to point to specifically for this, but what I will say is that there are some nonprofit organizations who do the work of God in a greater way. Disaster relief, right? I mean, when we supported, what are the folks in Asheville and Western North Carolina, there are some nonprofits who are set up with an infrastructure that can have a deeper impact and amplify the benefit of God's work beyond what we can do as individuals. I can't imagine that God would be upset with us supporting an entity that can amplify his work. I can't see it. Last question. But these are things that are true. And last question, and we will dismiss. I'm involved, number 9. I'm involved in a lot of ministries at Deep River, and I contribute money out of pocket for food and supplies. Can my food and supplies contributions count towards my overall church giving? Each one must purpose in our hearts. I would not recommend that we come to God with a balance sheet saying, well, okay, this is what I've done, or here's the quota that I've hit. I would suggest that we don't do that. We have to make decisions beforehand about what we can and what we think we ought to give. And if we ever give outside of that for the cause of God, I guarantee you can't ever outgive him. I promise you can't. You purpose $100 a week in your heart and you gave another $25 to pay for pizza, that will never go wrong for you with God. Doing more will never go wrong for us with God. This ends our class. I urge you to consider pledging more to give back to God based on your love, your faith, and your gratitude. I urge you to do that. And I will end with this. Acts chapter 20, verse 35, Jesus is quoted as saying that it is more blessed to give than to receive. And the last thing, I don't like to use myself as examples because I don't think I'm a great example for a lot of things. But I just want you to know that as I've taught this class for 7 weeks, I'm trying to pay attention to these principles as well. I've been out of work for 5 months. From January 20th, 11:59 a.m. to June 30th. And in that 5 months, with no job and no prospect of job, got one now, I made the decision beforehand. I purposed in my heart that I was not going to decrease my giving from when I was working. I'm not saying that because I'm anything special, because I'm not. I'm not the person to be the poster for anything. But I want you to understand that I took a faithful plunge to do that as well. And you know what? It worked out. Got a job, and every week, got Starbucks. Every week, it worked out. We're dismissed, guys.